Turn with me, please, to the Gospel of St. John, chapter 8. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives in verse 1. Early in the morning, he came again into the temple. And all the people were coming to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery, having set her in the midst. And they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery in the very act." Now in the law of Moses, that is, in the Torah of the Jews, in verse 5 of John 8, we're commanded to stone such a woman. What do you say? And they were saying this, testing him, in order that they might have grounds for accusing him. But Jesus stooped down with his finger and wrote on the ground. And when they persisted in asking him, he straightened up and said to them, "He who is without sin, let him be the first to cast a stone at her." And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. We have tapes like Simchat Torah explaining the background of this and what was actually happening. But what I'd like to look at now is the loaded question. The loaded question. This was a loaded question. The Lord Jesus was asked many loaded questions. And he always had the wisdom to give the appropriate answer, even though the question was loaded. And we're told to be instant in season, out of season, always ready. This is what in juridical slang, I'm informed, would be called a blue law. A law that is actually technically on the books, but is rarely enforced because it would have to be enforced selectively. It's too hard to enforce because the requirements to get a conviction were that you had to have completely independent witnesses who could in no sense be guilty of the same thing. So even though the law was on the books, it was rarely enforced. Well, of course, it still is enforced in Islam, but the Hebrews rarely enforced it. It was too difficult to enforce. There was a certain procedure, and it was too difficult to get a conviction. This woman was simply the bait for a trap. They were trying to set Jesus up. If he showed mercy, they would say, "You're breaking the law of Moses, you're violating the Torah." On the other hand, if he said, "Stone her," they would say, "Well, you see, where's your mercy?" They get him going or they get him coming. They thought they could simply set him up. This is a loaded question. If you grew up Christian, the likelihood is if your parents were saved, or one of your parents at least was saved, and you grew up in a believing family, and you grew up in a believing church and Sunday school, and bedtime stories were from the Bible and things like that as a little kid, you do not understand unsaved people the way that somebody was who was saved out of the world. On the other hand, if you were saved out of the world, you've got a lot more baggage with you than people who grew up Christian, but the longer you've been saved, the more you lose your capacity to understand what it's like not to be saved. You forget thinking what unsaved people think like. Your friends are Christian, your friends from church are Christian, you marry a believer, things like that. We lose our capacity to understand unsaved people. Now, this shouldn't happen. Jesus warned us, the sons of darkness are shrewder than the sons of light. We shouldn't be naive, we shouldn't be gullible, but generally speaking, Christians can be very naive and gullible. The loaded question. When an unsaved person asks a loaded question, in actuality, they're never interested in the answer. When somebody asks a loaded question, they're only interested in the question. They're interested in using it to set us up. They're using it to get you to paint yourself into a corner you can't get out of. They have no interest in the answer. It's not about the answer, it's about the question. That is the nature of a loaded question. Another time they asked Jesus a loaded question about concerning levirate marriage. A man has a wife, and he dies leaving her a widow with no children. No Yerusha. Now your children were your pension basically, and it was also the inheritance and the way to take care of a parent in their old age. So he marries the brother, a Levirate marriage, but then the brother dies, no children, and then the next brother dies, no children, 7 times. No children, she marries 7 brothers. In the resurrection, whose bride will she be? Well, Jesus answers the question. But they weren't interested in the answer to the question. They were only interested in the question. On Palm Sunday, he gets another loaded question. But he does a very Jewish thing in his method of argumentation. They ask him, the Sanhedrin say, by what authority do you do these things when the people are singing the Hallel Rabbah to Jesus? They're singing, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai, barachnu hem mibet Adonai, hodu Adonai ki tov, ki le'olam chasdo, Hoshana, Hoshana, la ben David. By what authority do you do these things? And Jesus replies, well, I'll tell you, but first you have to answer me a question. Was the baptism of Yochanan HaMatbil of God or of man? And they said, well, if John the Baptist, we say it was of God, why didn't you listen to him? And if we say it was of man, the people will be angry. They held him to be a prophet. We can't answer that. And Jesus says, well, then I can't answer you. Of course, most of you know he was not saying, if you don't tell me, I won't tell you. What he was saying is, the law and prophets are preached until John. Now grace and truth are preached from the time of Jesus. John represents the epitome of righteousness under the law. John represents the Torah that shows we're fallen, that shows we're condemned. If you can't understand and accept the message of John, you can't possibly understand my message. If you can't accept law, you can't understand grace. The Torah imputes sin, it shows you're fallen. If you can't understand that you're fallen, you won't know you need a Savior. If you can't accept the message of John, you can't accept my message. The same people who will ask a loaded question will go ballistic. They'll hit the roof if you ask them an honest one. That's the unpardonable sin to them. Thou shalt not ask. They'll ask you a loaded question, but if you ask them an honest one that makes them reconsider their presuppositions, they can't handle it. They'll only respond in anger, or they'll walk away, or something like that. Thou shalt not ask. We've all had loaded questions. There's one loaded question everyone has had, or a version of it. In America, it was called Columbine, but in Great Britain, it was in Scotland. It was a place called Dunblane, and a crazy guy, probably demon-possessed, shot 11 children dead. Now, in Britain, it's not like America or South Africa or Israel. It's not a gun culture. You know, the gun crime, something like that would freak people out. This doesn't happen in a little town in Scotland. This happens in Columbine or Johannesburg or Moscow, but it doesn't happen in Scotland, but it did. And the following Sunday was the memorial service for the children from the Church of Scotland, the Presbyterian church, and they brought the coffins in. And I was in the north of England on my way to speak at a church that Sunday morning, and I was driving to church, and I switched on the radio when I was driving to listen to the memorial service for the children. And the minister of the Church of Scotland, Presbyterian, came out, and he said, "O God, our Father and our Mother." That's the Church of Scotland. They had the 11 coffins there. That was the Church of Scotland. So anyway, I spoke at this church in England, a place called Warrington, and some guy came to the church, a brother in faith, who brought an unsaved friend to church that day. He knew I would be there, a visiting speaker, and he'd been witnessing to this unsaved friend. And this unsaved friend came up with the question we've all heard, in one version of it or another. And his unsaved friend said to me, "How can you expect me to believe in your Jesus, your God? If your God is so good and such a God of love, why did he allow those children to get shot dead in Scotland last week, in Dunblane. If your God is so powerful, how could he have allowed something so terrible to happen? How can you expect me to believe in a God like that? If I had that much power and I loved, I wouldn't have let that happen to those children. How can you expect me to believe this? We've all heard something like that. Why does your God allow evil to exist? The theological term is called theodicy. The book of Job is based on this concept. Why does he allow these terrible things to happen in the world? Why does he allow all this evil in the world? So I said to this guy, first of all, Jesus said the world is in the power of the wicked one. Please don't blame my God for what your God does. My God said, it's better to have a millstone tied around your neck and be cast into the sea than to hurt a little child. He said, the God of this world is a murderer from the beginning. If you're trusting in this life, in this world, that's your God. Don't blame my God for what your God does. You're blaming the wrong God. But let me answer your question. Yes, my God is a God of love, and he's a God of power. And my God is going to destroy your God. Don't worry, he's going to destroy your God. The Son of Man came that the works of Satan would be destroyed. But let me tell you why my God has not destroyed your God today. Let me tell you why my God has not abolished evil today. Yes, he's a God of power. Yes, he hates evil. And yes, he plans to abolish it. But let me tell you why he has not done so today. Because he's also a God of love. And he loves you. And if he came back and abolished evil today, he'd have to abolish you with it. He doesn't want to send you to the lake of fire. Hell was not made for people. It was made for Satan and his angels. Because he loves you, that's why he doesn't abolish evil today. Because he's giving you a chance to repent and believe the gospel. That's why he doesn't abolish evil today. Because he loves you and he wants you to be saved before he does abolish it. The guy never thought of this. Unsaved people don't think of it. They just have loaded questions. I've been an evangelist to the Jews since mid-1970s. And there's one question I've gotten a number of times. My grandfather died in Auschwitz. He was a religious Jew. He wore a kippah, put on tefillin every day. He went to shul every Shabbos. He never hurt anybody. He was a tzaddik. He was a real mensch. He was a righteous man. And he was murdered by you Christians. That's what they think. Doesn't make, Catholic, Protestant, doesn't make, they don't think it, but just Christian. Hitler was a Christian. So now you're telling me because he didn't believe in your Christ in whose name he was murdered, he went to hell? Because he didn't believe in the person in whose name he was murdered, he went to hell? Ooh, that's a loaded question. Well, I'll tell you something. What if I told you that somebody's Italian father, or somebody's Polish father, or somebody's Welsh father went to hell unless they believed in your Messiah? It's not that a Jew had to believe in this Christian one, it's just that these Gentiles had to believe in the Jewish one. But let me answer your question. Not too long ago, an Orthodox Jew put a kippah, yarmulke, on his head, picked up a 9mm, went to Tel Aviv, and put 2 bullets into the back of Yitzhak Rabin. He did so in the name of Moshe Rabbeinu and the Torah. He was a religious Jew who killed in the name of Moses and the Torah. Moses never taught murder. Moses taught against it. Jesus never taught anti-Semitism. He taught against it. He said he came for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. How can I blame the Jew Moses for what somebody did in his name? Moses never taught that. Moses taught the opposite. Don't expect me to condemn Moses for what was done in his name. The ancient Israelites murdered their own prophets in the name of Moses. Don't expect me to blame Moses for what was done in his name. I cannot blame the Jew Moses for what was done in his name. And I cannot blame the Jew Yeshua for what was done in his name. I have to consider Moses for what Moses said and did, and I have to consider Yeshua, Jesus, for what he said and did. There's always an answer to a loaded question. Witnessing is like anything else. The Holy Spirit, of course, gives us wisdom, and the more you know the scriptures, the more familiar you are with the Word of God, the easier it is to answer, but also the more you witness, the better you get at it, especially if you have the gift of evangelism. Now, we're not all evangelists, but we're all witnesses. In other words, we can't all fish with a net, but we can all fish with a rod. Not everybody can stand up in front of a large group and preach the gospel and see results, but everybody can witness one-on-one, give their testimony, hand out a tract, knock on the door. We can all fish with a pole. Evangelists fish with a net, okay. But witnessing is like anything else. You are my witnesses, saith the Lord. The more you do it, the better you get at it. You can get to a point where you can anticipate what unsaved people are going to say before they say it. You know what they're going to say before they say it sometimes. It's like anything. Loaded questions are never a problem. Once you have been a believer a while, you know how to handle loaded questions. Jesus got them all the time. The problem is, the same people who will throw a loaded question at you, or at me, will go absolutely ballistic. They will hit the roof if you ask them an honest one. When young people, grow up in Christian families, if they go to university, they will come into a different world where you'll have a basically left-wing academic establishment, people professing to be wise who become fools, as Paul said, and, for instance, all biomedical education is predicated on a Darwinistic presupposition. They treat theory as fact. Information science says there's no auto-encryption. Now, when Charles Darwin was alive, there was no information science. Information science was basically born in the 1940s, conceived of in the 1940s. It existed embryonically in the early 50s. It was pretty much born in the late 50s, early 60s, came into its adolescence in the 70s. It didn't exist when Darwin was around. But information science says if there's a code, somebody wrote it, there's no auto-encryption. There are, in fact, software programs that can write other programs, but somebody still had to write the master program. There's no code that wrote itself without an existing intelligence. There's no auto-encryption, says information science. So somebody can go to a university and they can study information science and they'll be taught that there's no auto-encryption. Walk across the campus to the medical college or the dental college or to the graduate faculty of biology, and they'll tell you the opposite. You've got 20 amino acids, left and right-handed. To get the amino acids in the right configuration, to eventually get something called a peptide. Then right down to the level of atomic covalency, you've got to get the right sequence of peptides together to make a polypeptide to eventually synthesize one protein, which is an extremely long molecule. Now it can be done with computer-assisted means, but when I was a kid, when I was in university in the 1970s, if you were able to arrive at the structural formula of any protein molecule, it didn't matter what it was, just the fact that you did it, you get the Nobel Prize. Very long. And for every protein, there must be an equally complex coenzyme. Well, we're supposed to believe this happened by chance. When the Star Wars was first proposed in the 1980s, there was a big dispute among scientists in the States. We would need a computer that can simultaneously handle up to 100,000 lines of information, digital information, 100,000 lines. It will never work, some said. It will never work. 100,000 lines is just unthinkable. The human genome is 13 billion. 13 billion, a code with 13 billion lines of information, a sequence of nucleotides, 13 billion. That's just the human genome. That's not talking about the lobster genome or the poinsettia genome or the zebra genome or the protist genome, just the human genome, 13 billion. And now, from what I've been reading in journals the last few years, there's something proposed called the histone code, dealing with something called amino termini. I only half understand it. All the science I learned as a kid is either outdated or forgotten. But anyway, that's hundreds of times more complex than the triplet code by which RNA replicates the DNA. These are very complex coded information. Unfathomable. You go to one faculty, there's no auto encryption. Walk across the campus, there is. Tell me, Professor, do you believe we're in the information age? Of course. And you believe in the triplet code? Absolutely. Well, information science says there's no auto encryption. How can you have had this without an existing intelligence? I know what you are. You're one of those fundamentalist creationists. I didn't talk about fundamentalism or creation. I'm simply asking a scientific question. Who wrote the code? Thou shalt not ask. How dare you? Thou shalt not ask. Isn't science about asking questions? Thou shalt not ask. So you believe we're in the age of science? Of course. And you believe in gay rights? Yes. And you're a Darwinist? Of course. I see. One question, please. Now, I know that there is absolutely no evidence of penetrative same-sex relationships anywhere in the animal kingdom, zoologically, among any vertebrae. I mean, kangaroos have more sense, but is it not true that if homosexuality or lesbianism are natural conditions, homosexuals and lesbians, if they're indeed born that way, if it's indeed a congenital trait, they are therefore genetically inferior because they cannot reproduce? Is that not what Darwinism says? Survival of the fittest. Because it's non-reproductive, they must be genetically inferior. Isn't that true? Homosexuals and lesbians are genetically inferior according to Darwinism? No, I don't believe that. There's an organization in the States, and I imagine there's a branch in Australia, called Living in Freedom Eternally, life of homosexuals and lesbians who've gotten saved. Don't get me wrong, their sin was no different than mine. My cocaine abuse of my teenage years would have put me in the same hell had the Lord not saved me as their sexual perversion would have. But the fact is, I know people who the Lord set them free of that. And they give their testimonies. Unless somebody became disposed that way in a penal institution, virtually every male homosexual you will find had an absent or weak father figure, and every lesbian you'll find had an absent or weak mother figure. There's a sociological common thread. I don't believe they were born that way. Anthropologically, if it was a uniform condition, why don't you see it in tribal cultures in Africa and most of the third world? Why is it only something basically of decadent cultures? If it's uniform and anthropologically should be across the board, it zoologically should be practiced in other primates, certainly other vertebrates at least. But you say they were born that way. And it's like racism to be bigoted against people because of their sexual orientation. Well, does not Darwinism say, if you're a Darwinist, that they are therefore genetically inferior? It is a birth defect. Darwinism dictates that being born a homosexual or a lesbian, if they were indeed born that way, it is a birth defect because it's non-reproductive. Isn't that what Darwinism says, Professor? Thou shalt not ask. How dare you ask such a question? I'm only asking the question. You say you're a Darwinist and you believe in gay rights, they were born this way, well then they must be genetically inferior. Isn't that what Darwinism says? Well, they love loaded questions. But what one to you if you ask an honest one? Ethnic cleansing. When you take Darwinism to its natural anthropological conclusions, it all makes sense. Given the fact it was people of white European mitochondrial extraction who went to the moon, etc. Given the fact that the countries of post-colonial Africa were better off under British and French rule, economically and so forth. Therefore, black people must be genetically inferior. It is the Caucasians who are genetically superior, if you believe in Darwinism. Isn't that a fact? Thou shalt not ask. Oh. Well, in 20th century Europe, the best engineers were German, generally speaking, and the best scientists were Jewish. According to Darwinism, there could only be one master race. Who's it going to be, the engineers or the scientists? In other words, the Aryans or the Yits. Survival of the fittest. Hitler had to make sure he wiped out the Jews because they were the only ones he saw that were intellectually competitive in scientific fields with the Germans. The Germans had the von Braun and these guys. They were German. They were best engineers, but the physicists and chemists, biologists were predominantly Jewish, at least the best ones. Well, he went nuts. This is just Darwinism. Hitler was a Darwinist. He took the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche, corrupted Nietzsche's ideas, but he took the ideas of Friedrich Nietzsche based on eugenesis and applied them politically. Isn't that what he did? Wasn't it pure Darwinism? Thou shalt not ask. Darwinism is the pseudo-scientific basis of ethnic cleansing. Unless you really believe it, then it's the scientific basis of ethnic cleansing. Do you believe in protecting endangered species? Should we save the whale? Of course. And you're a Darwinist. Yes. Then why do you want to save the whale? If it cannot biochemically adapt to a changing habitat, it's not meant to survive. Why do you want to save the whale? Now, I want to save the whale, but I'm not a Darwinist. Can you please explain to me why you want to save the whale since you are a Darwinist? Why do you want to protect endangered species? Thou shalt not ask. Dr. Jonas Salk discovered the cure of poliomycin, the inoculation against polio. He openly said on television that there's a contradiction between his Darwinistic worldview and biomedical science. Why is he trying to save the lives of people who, according to Darwinism, shouldn't survive? He admitted that. What's really strange is Darwinism is on its way out for all reasons because of biogenetic engineering. People will think they can control evolution. The deification of man. That's why Darwinism will disappear. Man will think he can deify himself. He can control it now. Thou shalt not ask. On one hand, they're saying they believe in information science, they're against ethnic cleansing, they want to protect the whale, they're against racism. At the same time, they all promulgate a philosophy that gives credence to the things they claim to be against. There's a logical inconsistency. Whenever you question it, thou shalt not ask. So let's walk a little further to the university hospital. In Liverpool, England, we have Liverpool Women and Children's Hospital, a massive obstetric hospital. There have been premature babies that have survived as young as 17 weeks gestation. Tremendous respiratory underformation, underdevelopment of lung tissue and so forth, but they've survived down to 17 weeks. 17 weeks. About a month ago, Her Majesty's government voted to keep the termination point for abortion at 24 weeks. So in other words, you can go to the 8th floor, to the neonatology unit of the obstetric hospital, and they will be spending several $1,000s a day to keep one premature baby alive in an incubator who's maybe 20 weeks old. On the 10th floor, they're aborting one 22, 23, 24 weeks old. They're aborting babies who they could keep alive even if they were by C-section, forcibly C-sections, up to a month younger, or sometimes more than a month. Well, tell me, Professor, I've been reading about your work in the obstetric journals, in the Lancet, in the American Journal of Gynecologists and Obstetricians. You're a prominent professor of obstetrics. Oh, thank you. I'd like to ask a man of your distinction and achievement a question. Can you answer, doctor? I'm sure I can. You're spending several $1,000s a day to keep one premature baby alive in an incubator on the 8th floor. 2 stories up, you're aborting one of the same age or even older. Abortus provocatus. Can you please tell me, doctor, how to distinguish between the two? I mean, if you can save the life of a baby at 17 weeks, why are you aborting them at 24 weeks? What is the difference between the babies on the 10th floor and the babies on the 8th floor, other than a 30-second elevator ride? Can you explain that, Professor? Thou shalt not ask. How dare you? Don't you believe in a woman's right to choose? What about the baby's right to choose? You can't say it's just an irrelevant clump of cells when you have ones who are younger that can survive. Only an honest question. How dare you ask? Nothing but hypocrisy. It's all hypocrisy. Professing to be wise, they become fools. The logical inconsistency in their value system, something they refuse to confront. Just ignore it as if it will go away. But in fact, it's only going to haunt them. And they will reap what they sow. They're going into these crises with public health systems, national health systems, social security systems. America has aborted 48 million babies since Roe versus Wade, a setup by the ACLU. The next battle is going to be involuntary euthanasia. Too much economic strain to keep old people alive. Bye-bye, granny, kiss grandpa goodbye. Next of kin, non-consensual termination of geriatric patients, disconnect the respirator. The same generation responsible for abortion is going to reap what it sowed. Shortages in the labor force? Oh, we'll just get them from Indonesia. Yeah, what comes with them? Allahu Akbar! But wait a minute. Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance. I see. Well, given the fact that Islam is a religion of peace and tolerance, I'd like to ask a question. Why were 3,000 churches burned to the ground last year in Indonesia? If it's a religion of peace and tolerance, I mean, I've been to Morocco, I've been to
Turkey, I've been to Jordan, I've been to Egypt, I've been to the Persian Gulf, I've been to Brunei, I've been to Malaysia last week, I've been to Indonesia. I've been from one end of the Muslim world to the other. I must have missed something. I've been to many Muslim countries. If it's a religion of peace and tolerance, can you show me one, please, just one Islamic country that will give Christians and Jews the same rights they get in Australia, Britain, America, and Israel? Where's one? Thou shalt not ask. It's a religion of peace and tolerance, says some oil whore politician in Washington owned by the international oil conglomerates. See, Texas is an interesting place. At election time, every politician in Texas is born again. But at night, they go home and pray to a Texaco sign. If it's a religion of peace and tolerance, can you show me one place where it's either peaceful or tolerant? That's because of those Israelis. I see. It's because of Israel that 80,000 Christians have been killed in the southern Philippines. It's because of Israel that 300,000 Christians have been killed in East Timor. It's because of Israel that 3.3 million Christians have been butchered by Arab Muslim militias in Sudan. How can this be a religion of peace and tolerance? I'm only asking the question. I'm not making an accusation. You made a claim. I'm asking the question. Where is Islam, either peaceful or tolerant? Give me one example. Please tell me where it is. Thou shalt not ask. Don't ask. Asking an honest question is reprehensible. Asking an honest question is inexcusable. Asking an honest question is just pushing things too far. Oh, they can ask a loaded one. Lo and behold, don't you dare ask an honest one. That's the way the world is. But those are just Darwinists. Those are just crooked politicians in Washington and Canberra and London. It gets into the sphere of religion. I once debated a rabbi in the Upper West Side of Manhattan in my native New York, big Jewish neighborhood, a lot of Orthodox Jews. He was an Orthodox rabbi. And I talked to him, and he was giving out questionnaires about Judaism to people to try to get them to become Orthodox, to make teshuvah. So I answered all the questions right, and he was pretty impressed. And then I spoke to him in Hebrew, and he was very impressed. But he asked if I was Israeli. I said I wasn't, but that's what a lot of people in New York would speak Hebrew, but there's a lot of Israelis. But I wasn't an Israeli. I was, but not born Israeli. And he was pretty impressed. But then he found out what I believed. And I asked him, look, HaMashiach yitzterek lavo v'lamut lifnei ha'chorban shel beit hamikdash hashenit. Daniel 9 says the Messiah had to come and die before the second temple would be destroyed. This is affirmed in the Talmud. And I showed him where, in Sanhedrin. Tell me, Rabbi, if the Messiah had to come and die before 70 AD, who is he? He said, give me a better source than Daniel. I said, but you just told me you believe the Hebrew prophets wrote the Word of God. You're asking me for a better source than God? If there was a better source than God, by definition, he wouldn't be God. Can you please reply to my simple question, Rabbi? Who was the Mashiach? He had to come and die before 70 AD. Who was he? Thou shalt not ask. Literally. Rambam, Moses Maimonides said, there's a curse on reading Daniel 9, for the time of the Messiah's coming is foretold in it. It literally says in the rabbinic writings, don't read it. It literally says, don't ask that question. Keep away from the text of Daniel 9. Hey, Monsignor, I'd like to ask you a question. St. Peter was the first pope, and, all right, you believe in transubstantiation, that the wine becomes transubstantiated into the protoplasmic blood of Jesus. Yes. Well, I look here in Acts 15, and the apostles were there, and it says Peter was there, calls him Simeon. That's St. Peter, isn't it? Yes. Well, the apostles condemned the consumption of blood. They said we shouldn't be vampires. We shouldn't be cannibals. It's condemned. Now, if that wine is transubstantiated, that's the literal blood of Jesus, why are you drinking it when the first pope said you shouldn't? Don't get me wrong, I don't think Catholics are vampires. But they think they are. Can you please tell me, Monsignor, if you really believe that's the blood of Jesus Christ, why are you drinking it when the first pope said you shouldn't? Thou shalt not ask. About 4 months ago, I was teaching a Bible study just to a home group at our office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, American office of our ministry. And a knock came to the door, a familiar knock. This one. That's the Mormon knock. It was like this. That's a Jehovah's Witness. I'd know that knock anyway. Bring him in. You want some coffee? You're going to want some Jack Daniels by the time we get done with you. Come on in, sit down. Give them some coffee. I went to print some things off the internet. You know, I've been studying your religion a bit, and I have some questions. I'm glad you stopped by. I wanted to ask you. We're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah, I know. And there was a couple in the Bible study group from the church, and were in the process of adopting a little boy that they were fostering. He was a little black kid from a dysfunctional family with drugs and the rest of it. Nice little kid. And I brought the kid up. I asked him his name, told me his name, asked him how old he was. And I asked him, well, you like baseball? He was like, Rounders. I said, yeah, I like baseball. So what team you like? You like the Pittsburgh Pirates? Yeah. See, he likes baseball, same as the white kid. You like ice cream? Oh, yeah, I like ice cream. What kind of ice cream you like? The chocolate. Oh. See, he likes ice cream, same as the white kid. Gave him a few bucks. Go get some ice cream. When I was a kid, my uncle gave me $10. He said, don't tell your mother I gave you this. I said, it'll cost you more than that. So I had these things I printed off the internet. And I said, according to your religion, this little boy has the mark of Cain because he's black. He's the descendant of fallen angels. And if he ever joined the Mormon priesthood, it would be the end of the Latter-day Saints. And if any Mormon ever married him, they have to be killed. We don't believe that anymore. I know you haven't believed it since the 1970s, since the civil rights movement forced you to change your doctrine. You had a new revelation. So, up until the 1970s, being a black person meant you had the mark of Cain. But after that, God changed his mind. I mean, up to the 1970s, this kid was a descendant of fallen angels. What did God do? Change his DNA? We don't believe it anymore. So you were wrong. Brigham Young was wrong. He's the one who taught it. Your prophet, Brigham Young, was wrong. Brigham Young was a prophet of God. Well, then why didn't you believe him? Well, God showed us to change the doctrine. But wait a minute. And I read it. Brigham Young says this is the doctrine of atonement. Any Mormon who marries this kid has to be killed, and this law cannot be changed. Why are you changing a law that Brigham Young said cannot be changed? Thou shalt not ask. I got a burning in my bosom, and I testify to you the Church of Latter-day Saints is true. That's supposed to settle everything. They just resort to their testimony. That's supposed to settle everything. I got a burning in my bosom. Rank stupidity. No answer to the honest question. Just thou shalt not ask. Same with the Jehovah's Witnesses, with Charles Taze Russell and Rutherford. Got back issues of the Watchtower proving they were false prophets. The world went under 1914, world went under 1915, world went in before World War I was over. Oh, boy. Thou shalt not ask. They really freak out when I take out the back issues of the Watchtower that I got from this ministry of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They just can't handle their own literature. This is your literature. It's your Wake magazine. It's your Watchtower. Can you please answer the question? No. Why not? Thou shalt not ask. It's always thou shalt not ask. It's the cults, it's false religions, it's rabbis, it's imams, it's monsignors. It's Darwinists, it's politicians, it's left-wing academics, it's greenies. It's always the same. The loaded question, they'll throw at you. The honest question, they will throw a fit. You can't deal with people who won't deal with facts. People who think with their emotions. But what's really sick is when they claim to be people who are logical, like lawyers or scientists or physicians. People who supposedly think rationally on the basis of science or of evidence. Once more, professing to be wise, they become fools. I don't know about Australia, but I imagine it's something similar. In Great Britain, most of the Christian unions at universities, most of the students are science students. The others think it's unscientific to believe in the Bible. Thou shalt not ask. But that's the world. That's unsaved people. That is just the way the world is. My problem is not with the world, but that's the world. My problem is different. Turn with me, please, to 1 Samuel. Chapter 17. Verse 26, then David spoke to the men who were standing by him, saying, what will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should taunt the armies of the living God? And the people answered him in accord with this word, saying, thus it will be done for the man who kills him. Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men, and Eliab's anger burned against David and said, Why have you come down, and with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your insolence and the wickedness of your heart, for you've come down in order to see the battle. But David said, what have I done now? Was it not a question? It was only a question. Then he turned away from him to another and said the same thing, and the people answered the same thing as before. Now we're not talking about people who are not our brethren. Now we're looking at people who claim to believe what we do. Somebody with a 5th grade education could get a copy of the American Declaration of Independence or the preamble of the Constitution and simply read it. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect government, etc., we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. It is a theistic document. Parliamentary democracy in Mother Britain and American democracy, constitutional democracy, were both predicated on a theistic presupposition that there's a God. We have to have equality because God wants it. We have to be governed by men who are governed by God. Otherwise, democracy won't work. We have to be a nation of laws, not of men, because that's what God has ordained. That was, for all their mistakes and faults, the Puritans understood that. So too, the American founding fathers understood that. Anybody with a 5th grade education could read these documents and say, the people who wrote these documents believed there was a God and democracy was based on that presupposition. But you've got people who went to Yale Law School on the Supreme Court who think they're the supreme being who will say, no, you can't say that. It's unconstitutional. Wait a minute, the Constitution says there isn't. Thou shalt not ask. But that's the world. They're all hypocrites. What about our brethren? David simply asked the honest question. If we're the armies of the Lord, Adonai Tsevaot, the Lord of hosts. Tsevaot means armies, hosts. That's what it means in Hebrew. Why aren't we getting the victory over the Philistine? Who's this barbarian heathen? If God is with us, why can't we get the victory? Why is everybody afraid of Goliath? What's the problem? Is it because our leader is backslidden? Is it because Saul is a backslider? Is that the reason we can't get the victory over the Philistine? Thou shalt not ask. I know your insolence. Who left you with those few sheep? You got a little church. We got a big one. Yeah, you got a big one. But you can't do anything about the Philistine. You can't do anything about homosexual and lesbian militancy. You can't do anything about pornography on the television. You can't do anything about the growth of radical Islam in Australia or Britain or America or anywhere else. You can't stop the moral landslide. Yeah, you got a big one, a big army of losers. What's the problem? How come you're not winning? How dare you ask that question? Verse 29, what have I done now? It's just a question. You asked the wrong question. No, he asked the right one. He asked the logical one. Now as his brothers get angry. Right now, people in Australia and elsewhere are boarding airplanes to go to Lakeland, Florida, where a man who was imprisoned as a pedophile for molesting a 7-year-old boy got himself covered with tattoos after becoming a Christian, whose mentors are sex perverts, proven to be sex perverts after they were Christians, the Kansas City false prophets. They're going there because this is the third wave. It's the sequel to Pensacola and Toronto. Just like The Godfather, part 1, part 2, part 3. This is The Lunatic, part 1, part 2, part 3. It's the sequel. The prequel was Kansas City. I remember the late John Wimber and Mike Bickle bought the Kansas City false prophets, the homosexual alcoholic Paul Cain, and the sexual predator Bob Jones, the mentors of this guy in Lakeland, Florida, Todd Bentley. And they predicted at the Docklands Arena in London in October of 1990, August of 1990, that by October of that year, the Great Latter-day Rain Manifest Son's outpouring was going to happen. An unbelievable distortion based on pure Gnosticism of Joel chapter 2. Well, more mosques have been built in England since October of 1990 than churches. Who had the revival? Islam? You people said, the mentors of Todd Bentley, the Kansas City false prophet said, this great latter-day rain, the manifest sons, the man-child, it was all going to happen in October of 1990. Why should we believe you now? It didn't happen then. Why should I take your word for it now? Where's the revival you said was coming in 1990? Thou shalt not ask. Well, then they were all going, the same people, the same churches were going to Toronto, Canada for the drunken hysterics. They were going to see Rodney Howard Brown drinking at Joel's place. Joel chapter 2, verse 5 says, wake up, ye drunkards. He was singing a song drinking at Joel's place. Joel was saying, sober up, Rod.
All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. Jacob, you're still too far away from us, but nonetheless, you are awake. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well in Jesus. Praise the Lord, but only in Jesus.
Amen. God bless you, brother. Thanks for being here. We'll go with Davey. Davey, you're not too far from Jacob. How are you?
Yep, doing pretty good, thanks. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for being up with us. I know it's early. It's even earlier where David is. David, good morning. How are you?
I'm on my second cup of coffee. We started at 1 a.m. my time, so I get the gold star this week for the earliest riser.
You get it.
Usually Davey's got a collection of them, so.
Well, happy June for you guys. It's already June 1st there, so
That's right.
Happy June. May's still here with us, and Jay, 31st of May. Flowers are still blooming.
Yes, it is. It's a beautiful sunny day in California. The only thing that is the problem is that, unfortunately, this state is completely given over to Satan. Well, maybe not completely, but
Politicians are.
the politicians are for sure.
Definitely, yeah.
No,
So-
I'm in Australia and it's the same thing. Doesn't matter where you are.
Welcome to Babylon. God bless you guys. Well, at the same time, Jacob, you've been out there in Australia. How are the meetings going there?
Meetings have been going quite well, praise the Lord. Yes, particularly Brisbane, Sydney. We also had a meeting at Tullamarine near Melbourne. But now we're in Geelong, which is in the same state. It's in Victoria, but it's in the outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne. But we're expecting quite a good attendance tonight, tomorrow, and the next night. From there, we move on to Perth.
Amen. Well, I'm glad the bird flu didn't get you because you're in Victoria, so that's where the epicenter was. So you're good. Davey, where are you guys going to be at for the rest of the month?
Yep, well, today and tomorrow at 2 p.m. Join us if you're able to at the Ridges Geelong. And on Tuesday and Wednesday in Perth, we'll be at the Doubletree by Hilton, Northridge. So be sure to join us. The meetings there will be 6 p.m.
Awesome. Perth is going to be great. I remember being in Perth with you guys. Victoria's going to be great. So God bless you guys. I pray
After that,
for
we move on to Singapore.
Yeah,
We'll be
well,
the 8th and 9th.
absolutely. David, you're out there already. Well, not in Singapore, but you're in Thailand, and you'll be heading back to Singapore. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm going to catch up with Jacob there, literally. But yeah, I speak this weekend actually at Country Church, about a half hour north. A lot of long neck ladies and the local tribe, Burmese tribes. It's interesting because you don't just translate from English into Thai, you translate first into Thai, then into Burmese. So that's interesting. Two languages.
Two languages, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys still visiting the prisons and sharing the gospel there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
It's we just sent a whole bunch of more letters to try to get into some other places when Jacob comes soon.
All right. Well, keep sharing the gospel, brother. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I just want to, welcome everyone and bless everyone that is here watching live on different platforms, from YouTube to Facebook to Telegram to Vimeo, of course, to Rumble. We appreciate them very much so. To our own websites, memorialtv.org, memorial.tv. And of course, we want to welcome those who are on Twitter, which we want to use more frequently, especially the fact that they give us a little bit more freedom, unlike the other ones that shall not be named that we're on right now. But nonetheless, we wanted to welcome you in the name of the Lord. Remember, Jacob's on all these platforms, Bible studies and other great studies from Sandy are also on Memorial TV, memorial.tv, and they're also on YouTube, but they're also on podcasts, and you can find us there on different platforms. Boy, there'll be so many to mention, but they are there. And do we have that ticker? Is that still going, Jay? Perfect. So you can find it there, Buzzsprouts, and it can lead you to many options. And if you want more information, moriel.org. Lots of information on missions, what's going on in Israel, news information, and anything new that's with Jacob, and some of the news items that we put up there on moriel.org. And if you want more information about missions and itinerary, where Jacob's going to be, you can find it there. Some great stuff. So, Jacob, let's catch up. Let's get started. But by far, it's dominated the headlines since about, I would say, 1 o'clock in the afternoon here, maybe 2 o'clock in the afternoon Pacific time yesterday. We start hearing rumblings that the jurors were kind of get together, and it's dominated every news outlet since then, all across the world. It's Donald Trump has been found guilty. Jacob, give us a hot take. What are your thoughts? Bragg, Soros, you name it, it happened. Juan Marchand, the judge, absolutely disgraceful. But you give us your take. I could say a lot of things, but I want your hot take.
The injustice and blatant corruption of this is a slap to the face to not only the integrity of the justice system and then to the Constitution, but to the cause of justice in the eyes of any honest person. That is true. How Donald Trump is standing up to this continual pressure, as usual, I do not know. I know there's a lot of people who pray for him. Now, let me just point something out that's not going to make me any friends. I'm appalled at what's happening to Donald Trump. I think it's absolutely terrible, and I will address it in a moment. I did vote for him twice, but I did say when he did it, when he had the homosexual gala at Mar-a-Lago, and when he began to not really backpedal on abortion, but modified his position concerning abortion, when how far into the term it should be allowed, I did think that God did not have his hand on him the way that God did have his hand on him in the past. I do think divine protection has been to a degree removed from Donald Trump because of what he did. That does not mean I'm not praying for him. That does not mean I'm telling other Christians not to vote for him. I'm simply saying he made some serious mistakes. And I think in part, these things are happening to him because he should have not done what he did with the homosexual gala, him and Ricky Lake, whatever her name, from Arizona. He, as I've always said, it's the one thing Bill Clinton had right. Don't ask, don't tell. Just keep it a non-issue. But unfortunately, he came down on the side of the homosexual lobby in that instance, and I don't believe that God is protecting him in the way God did. Now, it pains me to say that. I wish it was not true, but I do think that is part of the reason this is happening, and I have to be honest about it. Nonetheless, I'm absolutely appalled. You have these Soros-funded district attorneys across the country who are motivated by the globalist agenda, certainly, but it is unbelievable. I'm talking about not just New York with this absolutely horrible man who, in a really just world, some people would say should be accessory to murder. He has a 60% down plea rate. This is Bragg. He is letting dangerous, even violent criminals go without bail who are recidivists, who are committing other crimes. When a Hispanic man, an elderly Hispanic man in a bodega in a grocery shop, tried to defend the shop from an armed robber, he killed the armed robber, and Bragg tried to prosecute him for murder. Bragg is an evil, evil man. He's an evil, evil man, and I pray that the judgment of God comes down upon him. I doubt such an evil man will repent. He's a wicked man. But he's not the only one. You've got Kim Foxx in Chicago. You've got that Crockett woman from Texas. You've got Paul Krasner Krasner in Philadelphia. There are 1,000 of these people who are basically pro-crime. The mayor of Boston, the female Asian mayor of Boston, is pro-crime. She is essentially decriminalizing crime, in effect. Not putting it that way, but not having, even burglaries will not be arrestable in certain cases. This is an evil woman. The Democratic Party, I'm not a Republican. It's completely evil. But again, it's the judgment of God. Nations get the leaders they deserve. Back to Mr. Trump. We have to understand what's happening here. The trial itself was a fiasco, a shame, and a disgrace. To call it a kangaroo court. I'm in Australia. There's more kangaroos now in the courtrooms of America than there are in Australia. And there's a lot of kangaroos here in Australia. Okay. You really want to see kangaroos, don't go to the Taronga Zoo in Sydney. You go to the courthouse in New York. They've got more kangaroos than we have in Australia at the moment. Mr. Trump's lawyers were denied a venue change. Witnesses for the defense who would give testimony saying that there was no election interference were barred by this biased judge. The judge, who's completely corrupt and is conflicted. His daughter is an anti-Trump political activist. Why was he not removed or recused from the case? He had no business being there. It is a completely corrupt judge and a completely corrupt system. And now he's going to sentence Trump. This guy who should be deported back to Colombia where he came from. He's not fit to be an American. He's not fit to be an American. He does not respect our Constitution or our tradition of equitable justice. We have then something that at most, well, it should have been non-prosecutable anyway because there was no crime. But if they were going to make a crime, it should have been a misdemeanor. And so you've got Bragg making something into 34 felony counts. 34 felony counts when there was no actual crime. All politically driven. Then you have the star prosecution witness, Michael Cohen, a proven perjurer, You've got a porn star and a proven perjurer, and Donald Trump, a former president, is convicted on the say-so of a perjurer and of a porn star, with a judge who is conflicted, with a prosecutor, Soros-funded, who pleads down 60% of real felonies. Real felonies are pleaded down. Something that isn't even a misdemeanor is pushed up to the status of a felony. You could not invent this kind of corruption and hypocrisy, but that's what we've come to. However, I would point something else out. In harmony with what we've been saying for a number of years, democracy is disappearing. It is not just this. It is not just this. It is part and parcel of the whole scenario. It is the liberal establishment going after Chief Justices Alito and Clarence Thomas, picketing the homes of Supreme Court justices. It is Garland's Gestapo, known as the FBI, putting Christian parents on terrorist watch lists because they object to the indoctrination of their children with homosexuality and other curricula that are in conflict with their Judeo-Christian faith. It is part of an overall attack on the judiciary and a subversion of the judiciary for political purposes. Again, it's like the Soviet Union. And of course, like the Soviet Union, the Pravda Izvestia was the same thing now. You can call it MSNBC, you can call it CNN, you can call it whatever you want. Social media, the media is controlled by the same corrupt establishment. There is not a freedom of speech. They're trying to sequester it. There is not an independent judiciary. There is not due process. It is all politically driven by the left. It is Stalinism. It is Nazism. It is fascism. But it is not democracy, and it is not the America that America had been. America, as we have known it, no longer is, and this underscores it. Now, again, I do believe Donald Trump has made some mistakes. I honestly do. And I said from the beginning, because of the bad performance of the Republican National Committee, and certainly of the Rhinos, but also of Mr. Trump personally, as we saw in Pennsylvania and in Georgia, I do not believe a Trump win is in the bag. Despite how bad Biden is, they can replace Biden with somebody else. People who vote Democrat are stupid enough to vote for Gavin Newsom, despite what he did to California or something like this. People who vote Democrat are either corrupt enough or stupid enough to do that. It is basically the senility and corruption of Biden and the mess Bidenomics has made of the economy that has put Mr. Trump ahead. If Biden is removed and replaced by a more viable candidate, Donald Trump would be highly vulnerable to losing. We ought not make a mistake to think that he's going to be a shoe-in or anything like this. We had false prophets like Pat Robertson, the late Pat Robertson, saying God showed him Trump was going to win. Yeah, well, Pat Robertson said Bush was going to win, and Bush lost. Do not believe these people with this QAnon stuff. I mean, these people are naive. They're wishful thinkers. It's simply not like that. A Trump victory is not in the bag. Now, obviously, I would rather have a Trump victory than a Biden victory or a Democrat victory. I would rather. Certainly, I would rather. God forbid. But there should have been a sweeping victory in the midterm elections, and there wasn't. We lost seats in the Senate. To the Democratic Party. I'm not a Republican, but they actually lost on the Senate, and only narrowly, very narrowly, took the House. This is a failure of the Republican Party, a failure of the Republican National Committee, certainly a failure of the Rhinos, who are no different than Democrats, people like Romney, and certainly it was a failure of Mr. Trump personally. He has to take responsibility. And I can see that he can lose the election. These convictions may persuade some independents. It may galvanize his base, and it may even speak to some Democrats. But it would also make some independents think we cannot have a convicted felon in the White House. It could hurt him, this political misuse of the judiciary. So that is my analysis. I can only appeal to the Lord on the basis of Daniel chapter 2. He, the Lord, establishes kings and removes kings. It is ultimately going to be in the hands of the Lord. This verdict, as unjust and corrupt as it was, this evil judge, this evil prosecutor, and I pray that the hand of the Almighty will be against them in judgment. I pray that the judgment of God will come upon them. I don't believe they will repent. I pray that the judgment of God will come against Bragg and against this terrible judge. Nonetheless, the Lord allowed this to happen for a reason. That is my take.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for your hot take.
Marco, if I may, Jacob, as usual, that was a great analysis. I have to unfortunately agree with you in one subject. It's a very unjust characterization to compare kangaroos to the New York officials. They have far more integrity, kangaroos that is, than anybody in that court.
I agree. I apologize to the kangaroos here in Australia.
Thank you.
I'm a guest in your country, and I should be more respectful.
Intelligence and integrity, the two eyes. Thank you, Jacob. Thanks for the hot take. You know, if a former president can be criminally convicted, right, over trivial matters, as political matters for sure, politics rather than justice. Jacob, what's that say to the rest of, let's say, conservatives or even Christians? And that's my concern. What happens to Christians in this nation?
I can find a better basis to bring criminal charges against Barack Obama for what he did with Iran and transferring that money illegally and so forth. I can find a basis to bring criminal charges against Clinton. I can find Clinton is a convicted perjurer. He's a criminally convicted perjurer. I can certainly find a better basis to bring criminal charges against Hillary Clinton. It is selective prosecution, except the evidence does not support even the indictment, let alone the conviction of Mr. Trump.
David, are we as Christians, are we under that a risk of a similar situation? They could do that to a, let's say, former president, the leading candidate for this election. Can they do that to us?
Of course, once you have a kangaroo court at the highest part of a state, which is what we've seen, it's very easy to just let it roll downhill and make people conform. You can have kangaroo courts everywhere because, you know, the fix is in and nobody's going to correct them. And because of the people, these people that are in power have such a desire to hold on to the power and to get more power, to create an autocratic state that just reinforces their desires in every aspect of our lives. I mean, this is where it's heading. We know that it's going to get even worse when AC comes on the scene.
Jacob, the reality that they did this open, naked, brazen.
Yes.
Should there be an outrage from the people? Otherwise, they know that they could get away with this and they're going to keep doing it.
The fact that the mainstream media did it proves they know they can get away with it.
How sad, isn't it?
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Jacob, are you in any way encouraged by the fact that $34.8 million were donated to Trump as soon as the verdict came down?
It's going to galvanize his base. It may even persuade some independents and Democrats to say, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. It may. But it may also hurt him because there'll be people, particularly independents and even some rhinos, who don't like Mr. Trump anyway, who are going to say we cannot have a felon as our candidate.
Yeah.
Don't forget, the sentencing is going to be just a few days before the Republican convention.
4 days.
Possibly, because he could well appeal this thing, and if the appeal starts, I mean, that could push an appeal. We don't know how long it'll take. It could push it past the election.
Yeah.
I agree with Alan Dershowitz. Mr. Trump was not well represented. He needs better lawyers than the ones he's had. I first of all agree with that. The second thing I would say, though, however, is if Mark Levin is right, and if he can get the right lawyers to push it, to get the Supreme Court to take up the case.
Right.
That may be one of the reasons they're trying to go after Alito and Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito and Justice Clarence Thomas already. They want to pack the court. They want to
do a Roosevelt. They want to do a
Roosevelt. This is the Democratic Party. Let's remember, Roosevelt was an enemy of democracy.
And it was his own party that stopped him. His own party with moderate Democrats who said this is unconstitutional. But do you see anybody, Jacob, doing that, even from the Republican side?
Ironically, the only person who has emerged so far as a moderate Democrat in the Senate is our friend from Pennsylvania, Pepperberg.
Fetterman.
No, Fetterman, yeah.
Man.
I never would have expected it. But
there was that one state senator from California that stood up on the pedophile.
Yeah, a state senator, but I mean the U.S. Senate.
Yeah, not in the
Tulsi
Senate.
Gabbard was also a Democrat who walked out of the party.
Yeah, she left. That's right.
Blagojevich, the former governor of Illinois, is another Democrat who stood up and spoke out. But
So
the
I'm
Democratic
wondering if
Party,
we're
as
going
I
to
said,
see some more.
I don't know.
Because
The Democratic Party of JFK and of Scoop Jackson and Sam Nunn, that is history.
yes,
So, Jacob, let
long
me ask you
time
this:
ago.
what comes next? Do you think they'll imprison a former president?
I'll try in New York is entirely possible. The Secret
Man,
Service also already visited the jails.
yeah, they did. Uh, Jacob, do you think they'll Epstein him?
I would not rule anything out, including that.
Wow. Yeah,
But that's less likely, but imprisonment is likely. Now,
right.
an appeal process is going to take place. That's for sure. But I hope this judge and this prosecutor will be brought to justice. I
Yeah.
don't have any hope in man's justice, but I do have hope in God's. We've seen certain things happen, like with Raisi, with Ibrahim Raisi.
Oh,
God
come
killed
on.
him. God
Remove,
killed him. God kills him.
remove him
Now,
from the earth.
God can kill him. God can kill Bragg. God can kill whoever. We should not underestimate the hand of God. We need to pray that God will act in judgment. And imprecatory prayer. It's a time for imprecatory prayer. As King David did in the Psalms, as the saints did in the book of Revelation, chapter 6. It's time to ask God to enter into judgment.
Jacob, do you think this opens Pandora's box in terms of if the Democrats, I call them the demon cats, open lawfare? Are the Republicans going to do the same thing to, let's say, Biden, Obama, Hillary, and all and all that lawfare that went on with Trump? Will they do the same?
Because of the rhinos, because of people, okay, Romney is fortunately going, but you've got people like John Cornyn. Rhinos are no better than Democrats. There are too many spineless, auto-emasculated political phonies in the Republican Party. The Republican Party does not have the courage or the integrity of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has no integrity, but it still is not as ethically bankrupt as the Republican Party establishment, as the rhinos.
So don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath.
Don't hold your breath. Now, the crimes of Joe Biden, the crimes of Obama, the crimes of Hillary, I mean, all they have to do is go back into history, right? Make a new law, like what happened in New York when this idea of, Jean Carroll, they went back in time, made this law. I mean, New York State just passed the law so she can bring the lawsuit against Trump. What about Paula Jones, Jacob? Remember that name? Paula Jones?
Absolutely.
$50,000?
Absolutely, Paul. Let's do it. But I mean, again, don't hold your breath. It should have been done already. It should have been done already.
Marco, if I may,
Yes,
real quick. So you talk about crimes. You know what's a crime? A crime is when you say use American ordinance, what Joe Biden did the moment the verdict came out, use American ordinance to shoot Russian cities.
Yeah.
That's a crime. That's a crime against a civilian population.
We'll talk about that because that's a big one. That is really a big one. In fact, it's unleashed a lot of the NATO countries to say, yeah, let's do it. Let's openly bomb Russian cities. But there's an article, Jacob wanted to bring this up, this article by a lawyer named John Yoo. He used to be under the Department of Justice under Bush, wrote an interesting article that said the only way the left is going to learn is that if we give them the taste of their own medicine. Basically going after these guys and have them lose out what the Republicans are going through right now.
In principle, he's right. And it may be one of the motives for what the Democratic Party is doing is the fear that will happen. However, let's look at what happened during the last Trump administration. You had people like Barr, who was a rhino pretending to be a conservative, as Attorney General, who appointed Christopher Wray. Donald Trump did. Trump did not use the resources at his disposal to go after the people he should have for criminal activity. From day one, he ran and said, lock her up with Hillary Clinton's crimes, with her emails, in violation of national security procedures. And as soon as he gets elected, he drops the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
He showed weakness from the beginning. Now, if Trump showed weakness, well, This is what
What's
you
left?
get. The
Yeah.
Democrats didn't show weakness, only the Republicans did. Hillary Clinton belongs in jail. Hillary
Yes.
Clinton belongs in jail.
Well, 33,000 emails from a private server, congressional probe into her email scandals, use a private email server, Clinton Foundation bribery scheme, to use Secretary of State as her position to engage in quid pro quo with foreign governments, Whitewater business scandal, on and on and
Not
on.
only
And
that, but they were fined because of the Steele dossier.
yeah, they were fined. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, she was fined, and nothing happened. The FSC, nothing happened. She lied about it, and nothing happened. So, Jacob, Hillary said that not only Trump should be put in jail, but his supporters as well. Based on the fact he said these people are serious about this stuff, not like the Republicans are not serious. Is there concern for believers that they will be targeted as conservative Christians?
Jesus said you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Of course, they will come after believers. Remember, the world is in the power of the wicked one. We struggle not against flesh and blood. Satan is on back of this. They're going to go after believers, and they're going to go after Jews, just like the Bible said. That is what's going to happen. What they don't know is Jesus Christ is coming after them.
Hallelujah.
And he always wins.
Yeah. Hey, Jacob, will this persuade maybe some Christians, that are very much politically involved and they see the writing on the wall, but they always say, and I've seen it over and over again, they always say, but don't worry, the Lord comes before tribulation. Will there be Christians maybe willing to give that up if this happens?
One of the things that the Holy Spirit is using to enlighten saved Christians that pre-trib is a fantasy and a myth invented by Darby and his followers. That is a nonsense. It's not scriptural. It was never believed by the early Christians. More and more Christians are abandoning it, and the Holy Spirit is showing them is the way the world is going. Why aren't we out of here yet? Why is this happening?
It's a valid question, isn't it? It's a valid question.
I do believe as persecution increases, you're going to see more and more believers coming to the realization that pre-trib is a nonsense, an invented nonsense, and it's a lie of the devil that many sincere believers have bought into.
Go ahead, David.
Can I ask something here?
Yeah.
Jacob, now as the world is moving towards good is evil and evil is good, so those that hold to even good are going to be in the firing line.
Yes.
I mean, you'll get persecuted for just being good, and if you don't have the strength of the Lord and within you, you'll fall easily, won't you?
Of course, but don't forget the Judas factor.
Yeah.
You've got left-wing Jews like Schumer, who are Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Blumenthal. You've got left-wing Jews like Steve Cohen and Adam Schiff, horrible people.
Bernie Sanders.
And Sanders, who are in the same party that is against Israel, and who are politically collaborating with anti-Semites within their own party not just against America, but against other Jews. So you have Judases you have Menlauses, they're called in Judaism from Hanukkah, within the Jewish community, and you have traitors within the Christian community. When you've got Calvary chapels having homosexuals speak at seminars in Idaho, when you have Tony Campola, when you have people professing to be Christians compromising on the LGBTQ or going in the left-wing direction that was set by the late Tim Keller, who fortunately I'm not saying I'm glad he's dead, but I'm glad he's gone. He was a terrible man. When these things, you've got betrayal in the church. I don't mean the nominal church. I mean among people professing to be believers. You have people who are professing to be believers who will go with the left, who will go with the left against Christian values.
Yeah.
Who will
don't forget the single celibate theology, which is being passed on today as perhaps a more palatable version of gay marriage and LGBTQ, and being paraded as something that we should be investigating and accepting it. Jacob, I want to ask you this. do you foresee perhaps false flags coming into the picture here now that you have some false attacks that have been done in the past, and now you have these Reuters, especially today, Trump supporters called for riots and violent and retribution after verdict. You have MSNBC printing out the same thing. Anonymous people on message boards that their IP address is not the same people that they're supposed to be. They're supposed to be, Trump supporters, but they're discovering they're leftists posing as Trump supporters. Do you see a false attack emanating from this?
Of course, you have media manipulation. It's completely managed and staged. Once again, last week, a transvestite went into a movie theater and stabbed young girls. The fact that he was a homosexual, it was played down by the mainstream media. Same as the homosexual, the lesbian who shot the kids in the Christian school in Nashville. They play it down. When crimes are committed by homosexuals and lesbians, when crimes are committed by illegal immigrants, it's played down deliberately. But if something can be attributed falsely to people who don't agree with the left, of course they'll do it. It is very easy now when you have governments like China who can send out massive emails from hidden internet addresses, posing to be somebody they're not, or saying something that they want to ascribe to somebody else and blame. We're in a cyber warfare zone. We're in a cyber world where the cyber world is a battlefield. And that is one of the things that will happen. They will send out emails and misrepresent it as being caused by conservatives, Christians, supporters of Israel, etc. But it's not new. They've always done this in the pre-cyber world. What did Hitler do when he burned the Reichstag?
Yeah, he blamed it.
He burned it himself and blamed his enemies. And Hitler was a socialist.
Yeah.
They're only doing what they always did, only now they're doing it in the cyber world. But the strategy has not changed.
Right.
They're just what Hitler did.
Jacob, you concerned that AI would even ramp this up to the nth degree when you can have an AI mimic someone's voices or mimic somebody on a video?
I believe there's instances of that beginning to take place already.
Could you imagine? All you had to do is release some kind of audio, Trump saying something crazy, that it was AI generated, and people don't notice this stuff. People don't think about it. I mean, it's a low level of the voter, low level intelligence voter is going to say, "Well, Trump is a racist." See, I heard it online. Yeah. I watched it on YouTube. That kind of
Not only that, but if you can have Donald Trump speaking Urdu or Pashtun saying something, and they put it online and people in Pakistan watch it, they'll believe it.
Yeah. We live in some dangerous times.
And they'll begin killing Christians because of it.
Jacob, I did want to ask you, before we move on to even more of a dangerous situation what's going on with World War III, do you think they'll get at Alito? I know the flag situation, the upside down flag, which is distress, and you got the appeal to God, which is the pine tree. Are they going to get to him? Because he's not stepping in.
And him and Clarence Thomas, they are desperate to try to neutralize them. Yes. You've got a worthless Rhino as the Chief Justice, Roberts. He's a worthless Rhino.
Yeah.
You can't trust him as far as you can spit. Okay. So they've got to target the conservatives like Alito and Clarence, and Justice Alito and Justice Thomas. And that is what they're doing. Absolutely. They need to try to neutralize the Supreme Court.
You remember when Roe versus Wade was overturned, there was this threats, even death threats. Even Schumer was elevating it, and getting people riled up to go after them. I mean, Schumer should be investigated. I wonder which flag Schumer flies in his house. I wonder if it's a Hamas flag.
He probably has an Israel flag upside down.
Oh. One of them has a red star.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Goodness, a Soviet Union flag, perhaps, or who knows? Who knows what flags they bow down to? But anyway, just want to get to the other one. Jacob, I think the greatest danger right now, it is the World War III situation. As soon as Trump was convicted, of this show trial. Biden, who was going to speak from the Oval Office, canceled it, went into a White House press release, and authorized the bombing of Russian cities using U.S. cruise missiles, saying it's open game. You can target Russian cities with U.S. weapons. This was secretly already done, but now it's open. Reuters, MSNBC, they leaked out all this information. Crazy stuff. Jacob, we are dealing with people that are absolutely crazy to do this. What are they doing?
The only sane policy is what Donald Trump said. We've got to negotiate with Putin. He's vulnerable. We have a basis to give him an incentive to withdraw from the Ukraine, but
Right.
you'd have to be able to say that Ukraine will not be in NATO. You've got to give him something.
Got to give
And
him something.
the very things that they could give him to negotiate to get what is in the interest of the Ukraine and of the West, they're giving away. Again, you've got people like Blinken and Jake Sullivan. These people are not fit to be dog catchers, let alone high government officials. And Biden and Harris are too stupid and incompetent to be anything. But
Jacob, is Blinken okay? I mean, he's on the night of doing this, he's out in a nightclub playing guitar, singing, while 1 million people have died. Ukrainians have left and right have been killed, massive, it's completely crazy, like Nero.
He's a useless clown. Look, Putin is vulnerable. It's time to negotiate. It is time to negotiate. I don't think there should be territorial concessions, but I think we should make concessions.
Medvedev actually went on social media soon after. It was immediately after Biden agreed to the targeting of Russian cities. And it says that you have to understand the following. This approval is going to bring us into consequences, not only NATO countries, U.S., obviously the U.S., NATO countries. This is not just military assistance. This is targeting Russian people. So to Jay's point, he should be, this is dangerous. This is, Biden should be fired for this.
They're French Foreign Legion in civilian clothes fighting in Ukraine. Officially, they're advisors, but you know what they're really doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
You absolutely have plainclothes of former American military personnel, probably defense contractors, acting as advisors in Ukraine, and the British are up to their teeth. The British are effectively, by some estimates, already technically at war with Russia.
That's right.
Now there are legitimate fears. Some point to the S-500 it's a missile defense system against both aircraft and against missiles, an ABM system. Okay. I don't think it's all that good. I think the Russians have overestimated how good it is, but it is something that the West does not have.
That's right.
Probably superior to the Arrow system or the Patriot missile system. I don't think it's as good as they say. I don't think it's invincible. I think that F-35s or F-22s can certainly circumvent it, but it's there. Secondly, I'm also concerned about hypersonic missiles. The United States is on the brink, or we've developed some prototypes of them, but Russia is ahead of us in that area. There is a fear of an arms race with Russia getting ahead, and they're wanting to deal with Russia now on that basis of trying to preempt Russia from being able to go further and making Russia invest more in its conflict in the Ukraine instead of in the development of these advanced weapon systems, which are a legitimate threat. But that is something you can negotiate.
Correct.
That's something that can be put on the table. Look, why are you doing this? We're doing this because you're doing this. If you stop doing this, we'll stop doing this.
Absolutely.
It was time to negotiate a year ago.
A year ago, yeah. Jacob, look at this. F-16s. Lavrov talked about this last night. Lavrov, which is the foreign minister of Russia, this is a deliberate signal of NATO to go into the nuclear sphere. They're going to give F-16s to Ukraine. NATO was.
Nuclear capable F-16s.
Yeah, Joe Biden demanded that they would be nuclear capable. And Lavrov was absolutely enraged about this. Okay, F-16s, but nuclear capable ones at the behest of Joe Biden?
Yeah, at the behest of the senile corruptocrat.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
again.
Obama. Yeah. But Jacob, this is the real world. I mean, this is real death, real men,
Yeah.
real lives that are going to be at stake.
It's like anything else. Why was Maxine Waters not arrested and indicted when she urged violence against government officials in the Trump administration? Why was she not arrested and indicted? You know what I'm saying? There's always going to be two standards with that. We can do this, you can't. When Trump won the election, Hillary Clinton went on TV and said he's not a legitimate president. For over 2 years, 2.5 years, those stupid women on The View and the women who were stupid enough to listen to them were talking about Russian collusion as if it was a fact when it was disproven. So they kept saying he's not legitimate, it's collusion, he's not a legitimate. When Republicans or when Trump said the same thing, it's a different standard. It's an outrage. How dare you say the election was rigged? Yeah. After they lied about the Steele dossier, were fined for doing it. The hypocrisy, the dual standards are unbelievable. Well, now what you're seeing is the same dual standards being brought into international affairs. There are two standards at play. They know that Donald Trump would negotiate and try to put an end to this thing. And I think you could get a good deal. You could get a good deal.
Look, nothing happened during those 4 years that he was president. He dealt with it, met with them, talked to them, and it worked out okay. As soon as it happened, as soon as the election of 2020 ended up the way it ended up, then you see Putin and Xi and Islam through Iran moving very, very
well, because of what happened in Afghanistan, it gave Putin the green light. He was emboldened.
Yeah.
Because of Jake Sullivan, because of Austin, because of Blinken, because of Harris, and because of Biden, he was emboldened. He knew that Biden was like Barack Obama, an auto-castrated babbler. When Obama said, we're drawing a red line, don't use chemical weapons in Syria, and then the Syrians crossed the red line with the backing of Russia, Obama did nothing. They knew Obama was a weakling and a liar, that he was a man who was castrated, that he had no gonads. Well, now they see the same thing, that Biden is a man with no gonads, except he's senile on top of it. That's how they do that. That is why they went into the Ukraine to begin with. Now, anybody in their right mind would know, as you say, North Korea was not shooting missiles over Japan again under Trump. They would know that Putin was at bay. They would know there were no wars, there were no conflicts happening. They would know that Gaza would not have happened if Trump was president. The same as they would know inflation was under 2%, 1%, 2%. The price of gasoline was $2 a gallon. They would know that. They would know that. These are undeniable facts. But all you need is a arrogant moron, a Hollywood has-been like Robert De Niro.
Oh, man.
They're yelling, saying stupid things, not looking at the actual facts, that the world and the country was better off economically and strategically under Trump. They ignore that. These stupid women like Bihar and Goldberg, Whoopi Goldberg, these women on the, her real name is Karen something. These women on the View, they are really, one, they're personally that stupid, but they also bank on the stupidity of the people who watch them and listen to them.
Yeah.
We just ignore the facts.
Yeah. Look, hey, Jacob, you think De Niro's still king of New York? He says he is.
You know, he's a Hollywood has-been. As I always say, you're as good as your last picture. Even A-listers, if they have a couple of box office failures in a row, they're no longer what they were. So what they tend to do is they do the Bianca Jagger thing. They keep their names in the newspapers and on television by going into left-wing political causes, because they do what Loretta Swit does. You know what I mean? They just become spokesmen for left-wing political causes to keep their face in the public with a public profile, because they can no longer make it on TV or in the box office or whatever. These are Hollywood has-beens. Only thing is now Hollywood itself has become a has-been.
Well, he got so shaken up. You can see he got shaken up. People went after him and almost snapped his heels, and he couldn't handle it. He started going after the crowd, and they nearly had him. They nearly had him. He had to go into his car just to get away from it all. I thought it was
He could not debate somebody.
no, he couldn't.
All he could do was yell because he's too stupid.
No, no doubt. On a more serious matter, Jacob, we watched the interview with Andrew Bridgen, the MP from the British MP. Confirmation for sure what we talked about last week. We're already at war with Russia, and Rishi Sunak does not want to be there when the war happens. So this is the snap election that we're having. Jacob, any thoughts on what he said?
I do not disagree with him at all. I do not disagree with him at all. Sunak does not want to be a wartime prime minister.
You know what the thing he said that was really interesting. It's in Parliament. It's a pantomime in Parliament. He said it's not a race between two parties. You know, he called it blue and red, but he's probably referring to Labour and the Conservatives. But he says, but it's about handing the baton to the next group that's going to handle. This is his quote: net zero, COVID response,
Yes.
the WHO, and the trans agenda. Pretty interesting. He lumped all those things as the next agenda. Jacob, your take on that?
Okay. In Britain, the Europhile members of parliament in the Conservative Party were against Margaret Thatcher. The same as Labour Party were against Margaret Thatcher, okay? Oh. Because she was a real conservative. Well, it's the same thing here. The Rhinos will team up with the Democrats against Donald Trump because he is an independent, authentic conservative who's not part of the establishment, except that he has compromised on the homosexual agenda.
Yeah, he talked about, what is it, Agenda 2030? Yeah, he talked about Agenda 2030, that this is something that they're going to do. So it is interesting, what he's saying. It has very valid reasons to think that the snap election is going to bring about the next phase. I would imagine next phase in Europe, especially in Britain. Jacob, the long-range Ukrainian strikes on Russia, green lighted by Nordic countries. This is Finland. This is Norway. Obviously, they gave the green light. The president of Finland said, hey, let's do it. We should not hold back. Russia needs to be pulled back. Latvia, Poland said earlier they're in favor of such strikes. The only ones that were not so much in favor, Italy, Hungary, and even German Chancellor Olaf backed up a little bit, not too much. He says he's still supported, but with caution. Jacob, NATO's full on board with, like Biden, full on board with striking Russian cities.
But it's also interesting that it's Scandinavian countries.
Yeah.
It's a newcomer to NATO, yet it's taking a hard line against Russia. They want to turn the Baltic Sea into a Scandinavian lake. Putin has begun to withdraw Russian troops from Kaliningrad, from the Russian outposts that separated from the rest of Russia.
Is it Estonia or?
Oh no, it's below Estonia and Latvia. Kaliningrad.
Is it Kaliningrad?
Yeah. That was a very heavily armed place because from there, Russia could strike Berlin. It could strike various.
Yeah. That's right.
In Scandinavia, and because he needs the troops for the Ukraine, he's pulled a lot of troops out of there. Now, there's still advanced weapon systems there, but he's pulled a lot of troops out of there. The Norwegian government, the Swedish government, and the Finnish government are very much thinking about the Baltics and also the Baltic states, Latvia and Estonia and Lithuania. Their concern is more regional than it is continental. But how do I put this? You've got Britain thinks one way, continental Europe is another. There's a division between the British Isles, between Great Britain and continental Europe. Well, similarly, there's a semi-division between Scandinavia and continental Europe, because of the Baltic Sea. The Baltic Sea is like the English Channel. Okay. Europe is not a monolith. Europe is in sections. There are at least four major sections of what we broadly call Europe. The British Isles, which is no longer in the EU, but is geographically there. So you've got the British Isles, then you've got Scandinavia, then you have the continent, and then you have the former Warsaw Pact states who are now part of the West. Okay? But pivotal to these are the ones who hate Russia the most. Poland hates Russia because of the Cold War. Bulgaria hates Russia because of the Cold War. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania hate Russia because of the Cold War. They live in that fear of a resurgent Russia. Again, there is reason to fear Putin and react to him, but it's better to negotiate. You've got him on the ropes economically to a degree. You've got him in a situation where he has high casualty figures. He's not been able to win this war rapidly, even though he has utterly devastated the Ukraine and killed tons and tons of people. He will negotiate. And instead of doing that, they're getting more aggressive at a time when they should hold out, not an olive branch, but hold out a carrier pigeon, send a carrier pigeon. Do you want to end this thing? It's to your advantage. We can continue. If you have any brains, you'll end it. You got yourself into something you didn't want to. Yeah. You've given yourself another 740 miles of border with NATO because of Finland. The whole thing is blown up in your face. Now, do you want to negotiate or do you want to lose even more? You can negotiate from a position of strength.
That's the reality. That's what you need to do.
You can negotiate now from a position of strength. Why not why continue to push things to the brink of a potential nuclear conflict? And why see more and more Ukrainians killed? Why?
Yeah, David, what's your take on this?
Well, we're certainly marching down the road to a world war. I mean, with France putting people on the ground, with America putting people on the ground.
Yep.
And it's just they've gone so far. It's almost like President Trump is basically a distraction for what's really going on. Now, they want these F-16s that are nuclear capable because Putin has said, look, 17 times strikes, nuclear strikes, and along with Lavrov and others that have said this. So it's almost like the war is ready to fire off. It's one more step, we're marching up to the line and everything, and nobody's paying attention to this. And this is probably the worst thing that's going on.
That's right.
It's if this thing lights off, it's all bets off, and so.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to see conscription. We're going to see men and women conscripted in Europe, in the UK, in the US. It is absolutely frightening to think how far that, Macron gives the green light. Finland gives a green light. Germany gives a green light. Of course, Biden gives a green light, several green lights. It just doesn't seem anybody wants peace. I think they want to destroy Russia.
And look, I don't know that it. Look, and it won't be just some missiles. I mean, like now we have the ability to turn things off. They have the ability to turn our phone systems off and attack from different ways. Instead of just that. Can you imagine if they? We've been talking for close to 15 years or more about the infrastructure, our electrical infrastructure is vulnerable to attacks from the internet.
And from EMPs.
Yes,
and,
EMPs.
From EMPs, but I mean, just turning them off. Just go in and turn the system off. They just, and it takes days to get it back on. I mean, we had one just a few times ago, the system went off. So I don't know, it could just it won't be war just in typical wars of green against the black and like that anymore. It'll be a multi-stage type wars, and it'll be crazy,
I think you're right, David. It'll be war on many fronts. Many will take advantage of
fronts, and no one will get left out.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to bring up the Israel and the nations, what's going on there. Jacob, 237 days since hostages were taken, none returned. Some of them we know were killed already. Israel's trying to destroy Hamas. Israel's trying to eradicate terrorists from that area. But the world said, stop, don't do it. Now, it's interesting to me with Ukraine is green light to try to destroy Russia.
Right.
With Israel is you can't kill terrorists. I watched that film Nova, which is it was heartbreaking to see that to young girls. We watched a little clip of about a minute of one of the clips from that movie where the girls were there and they lined them up and they said, well, look how many Zionists we can get pregnant. The Hamas were holding them hostage and before they took them into.
They were bleeding, facially bleeding.
Oh, they got beaten up pretty bad. So now they got the incursion into Rafah. Jacob catches up on what's going on. That movie's horrible. And I don't mean horrible in a sense of people shouldn't watch it, but it's graphic. It is rough, but I think people ought to know the reality of what the Jewish
left is so stupid it wouldn't matter. They think that they deserve it because they're Jewish. That is the left. That is these people who are protesting on behalf of Hamas. And they're all over the world. I saw a demonstration the other day in Sydney, Australia. The stupid people. They don't care about the facts. They care about the narrative. So, yes, I agree the film is shocking, but it will only shock people who are already aware of the injustices being perpetrated against Israel. But let's understand what's really happening. The FBI has been meeting secretly. Garland's Justice Department has been meeting secretly with the Council of American Islamic Relations, whose leadership has had Hamas contacts and whose leaders celebrated October 7th. Why is the Justice Department meeting with people who celebrated the terrorist attacks of October 7th? And now James Zogby, the Islamic activist in the United States, and CAIR are pressuring the Justice Department to investigate Jewish organizations who are opposed to Hamas. This is how far it's gone. Not only that, but this past week, it was finally admitted, something that the Israelis have been saying for some time, that Iran has nearly tripled its quantity of enriched uranium and now has the capacity to make at least 3 nuclear weapons, bearing in mind that it also has missiles, to make 3. This, of course, would not have been possible without Barack Obama. And it would not have been possible without Biden and Harris, who unfroze $300 billion, plus other money they paid Iran. Under Donald Trump, the Iranian economy was in extreme dire straits. They couldn't have afforded it. But the funding of Iranian-sponsored terror, that is attacking ships bound for the Suez Canal,
by the
Houthis that are funding Hezbollah and Hamas, all Iran, paid for by the generous policies of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. Now it is disclosed that they can make 3 weapons. They have enough to do it. They can do it very quickly, by some intelligence accounts in a matter of days, possibly. Days. This is even more serious in pushing the world to the precipice of a conflict in the Ukraine. What am I saying? The UK, France, and Germany moved to censure Iran over this. Notice these treaties did not work, did not stop them. Obama's sellout of America to Iranian terror did not work. UK, France, and Germany moved to censor Iran. The Biden administration is pressuring them not to. Biden is pressuring them not to. In effect, the Joe Obama administration, the old Biden administration, has always been effectively on the side of the Iranian terror. They have funded it, they have defended it, they have allowed it to continue developing a nuclear arsenal, threatening Israel, threatening the West, threatening even moderate Arab states. This has been their policy, and it remains their policy. Why are people like Valerie Jarrett and Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Harris, Jake Sullivan, Austin, Blinken, Susan Rice, why are these people not being held accountable? Why is Hillary Clinton not being held accountable? Why is John Kerry not being held accountable? Why? Not only is the Biden administration wanting to assure that Hamas will live to fight another day and carry out its threat to perpetrate more October 7th attacks, Biden wants to make sure they're able to do that. He doesn't want the Israelis to wipe them out. Now, they seem determined to allow Iran to acquire a nuclear capacity, which now they're on the precipice of getting. If this is not treason, I don't know how else to describe it. Now, I'm not speaking legally. I'm not qualified to do that. But in effect, this is betrayal, not just of Israel, it's betrayal of America. Biden is pressuring France, Germany, and the UK not to censure Iran when they've tripled their quantity of enriched uranium, enough to make 3 weapons quickly, making Iran a nuclear power in the hands of these Mahdaists who have no fear of death because they believe they will be Shahadi and get their 72 virgins. They don't care. Crazy people. Now, there is the hand of God. God killed Ibrahim Raisi and the Iranian foreign minister. God killed them. The God of Israel. They are almost certainly in hell, and Allah can't help them. However, I've been saying from the beginning that aid to Gaza should be distributed directly to the people, not given to Hamas, who is the government of Gaza. Hamas has been siphoning off the majority of the aid given. Yet the Obama administration wants to give them more aid. They airdropped aid. Well, the hand of God has struck again. No aid should be given to Gaza until those hostages are released. Not a drop of water, not a scrap of food, and not a pill. Now, I'm in favor of giving aid directly to the people of Gaza, but not giving it via or to or through Hamas. But that aid should only be given once the hostages are released. No, says Biden, let them keep the hostages. We're going to give them aid anyway. Well, Biden sends his floating dock to unload aid to Gaza. It's sunk. That American floating dock is being salvaged with the help of the Israelis, ironically. No aid has reached Gaza via that dock. The dock has sunk at the shore. I believe the hand of God sunk that dock that Biden sent. I believe God did it. And I believe that God killed Raisi. And I pray to God that he raises his hand against the Biden-Joe Obama administration. The same as he raised his hand against the leadership of Iran, I pray he raises his hand against the leadership of the corrupt American system. They're enemies of America.
Jacob, what do you think about Daniel Stilling? He's the counterintelligence in Sweden. He spoke about the same thing about Iran, and he held a press conference unveiling the fact that Iran uses gangs within Sweden, within Europe, all over Europe, to carry out attacks against Jews, against civilians. This is the Mossad's report. Mossad's report is the Kurdish Fox. Grenade shooting attacks in the embassy and Jewish synagogues. And they're planning more attacks before the Olympics this next month in July in France. Jacob, we've seen videos of France. We've seen videos of Belgium. This is Iran. This is what they perpetrate.
There's even reason to suspect, Marco, that the Iranians were involved in the burning of the Israeli embassy in Mexico City, much closer to home.
Oh, I could imagine. I saw the video. I could imagine. And all of them have this trail of Mahdiism, Jacob. Mahdiism. You explain that, Jacob, what Mahdiism is to those who are watching and haven't heard it?
The Islamic Messiah. Now, we know the Mahdi will be the Antichrist, but the Islamic Messiah. They're waiting for the 13th Mahdi. They're waiting for him to come.
And how, I mean, did they, I mean,
they believe by flying black flags in battle, they can hasten his coming. They believe by doing what they're doing under a black flag, this is the Al-Aqsa Brigade, that they can expedite the arrival of the Mahdi. We have to understand their cause is not simply political. It's driven by a demonized religious fanaticism, assisted by Barack Obama and Joe Biden.
Now, this is the Shiite version of Islam, very similar to the Sunni version, but this is a lot more focused on Mahdiism, and that's what they discovered.
Islam is more focused on Mahdiism than Sunni. Yes.
Yeah, the 13th Mahdi.
Go ahead, David.
Yeah, it's the 13th Mahdi that's going to bring war, and Jesus will come back with him and fight on his side, is the theology of it. So this is what they're looking for. And I've said a number of times, it's like everybody is getting ready for a great event to happen. They all feel like this is their time. Biden's madness of running us to world war, Iran pushing us to the edge of war, Hamas stirring up troubles for war in the Middle East, fear and anxiety among the nations.
None of them knowing the way out.
Way out.
One thing is for sure, the return of the Lord is getting closer.
Yes.
Jacob, I want to talk about the acceptance of a Palestinian state, or the proposal for the Palestinian state. You got Danish Parliament and Australian Parliament rejected. You're in Australia. Dave, you can fill us a little bit more. It was presented by the Green Party, and it was voted down 80-5. And I'm very happy about that. But the Green Party presenting this, David, we'll go to David real quick. David, very anti-Israel Green Party?
Yes, very much so. Gosh, the Green Party stands for just about everything, totally anti-Christian, totally anti-Israel, just, pro-abortion, they're pro-debauchery, pro-trans, all that kind of stuff. They're the worst of the worst of the worst.
Man, well, I'm glad it didn't happen, but this was the leader of the Green Party. This is his quote. He argued that recognizing a Palestinian state, establishing a Palestinian state, it's a concrete step toward peace. I don't know if they watch any of the videos of what's going on in the world. A move toward peace by giving terrorism a state. Yes. Well, this is exactly what the Spanish did with this, the parliament in Spain, and how foolishly supported it. But I'm glad it didn't happen. I'm glad that you being there, Jacob, you can talk about this a little bit more. The Labor Coalition and the Greens wanted to get this done, but didn't happen. Didn't happen in Denmark. Didn't happen in Australia. But it is happening in other places like Spain.
Yeah, Spain is definitely pushing for this. But notice something. It's not Hamas. They are wanting to give recognition to the Palestinian Authority, to Fatah, who controls the West Bank. that is an unelected government, a non-democratic government that has not had elections for over 18 years because they know if they held elections, Hamas would win. So they're giving a diplomatic recognition to a non-democratic regime.
Yeah. Now, Jacob, talk to me about Ireland real quick, because you did speak about Michelle O'Neill and coming in. She's an Irish politician, so of course served as the first minister of Northern Ireland since 2024, vice president of Sinn Féin. Now she's going to take a new position. What's going on there?
It is almost unbelievable that Sinn Féin has now become the ascendant party, both in the Republic of Ireland, but now in Northern Ireland, bigger than the Democratic Unionist Party, bigger than the Orange Protestants. And for the first time, would have been unthinkable, a First Minister of Northern Ireland will be not just an Irish Catholic, but somebody who was Irish Republican. Her father was a member of the Irish Republican Army. She comes from an Irish Republican family. Now, she knows how to repackage herself as a moderate, but she comes from a Republican background. And this will be a major step towards the reunification of Ireland. Be that as it may, she is Sinn Féin, and Sinn Féin is anti-Israel. Sinn Féin is a party with a history of anti-Semitism and stupidity and political terrorism against its own people. It's no better than the UVF or the Ulster Volunteer Force. It's no better than the Protestant terrorists. It's a criminal organization. It is not the traditional IRA of Michael Collins. But she is a product of that. Her father was an IRA terrorist.
Wow.
He was a member of the IRA. I believe he was imprisoned as one. So this is Michelle O'Neill. The First Minister of Northern Ireland now is not just an Irish Catholic, but an Irish Republican.
Wow. Sinn Féin, yes. It's in 2018, 2024.
Changes everything.
Man. It's interesting how these nations in Europe that bring in the open Islamic immigration, which brings in terrorism, reap a lot of what they sow. You saw that video in Germany. You saw the attacks in Sweden, and it's almost on a civil war. But what's shocking is that man in Germany openly stabbing somebody who was basically anti Islamic immigration to an extent, Michael Studenberger. Openly stabbed him at a place in what city was it in? It was in Mannheim.
Mannheim.
Yeah, and then it was basically the stabber, the knife wielding guy, was shot once, but he stabbed the police. He stabbed Michael Studenberger. So openly attacks.
Yes, you had Muslims attacked a 6-year-old girl in Ireland.
Man,
it's Obadiah 15. These European countries who are placating Islam and placating Hamas are going to reap what they have sowed. God's word does not fail. Genesis 12, 1-3, Obadiah verse 15. It will happen.
Even with all the warnings, even from Sweden's counterintelligence saying Iran is behind this, very little is done in other European countries to stymie, even hold back some of the immigration that's coming in.
Oh, well, after September 11th, the Bush administration continued to allow Saudi Arabians to enter the United States on an express visa program.
Jacob, the Olympics this year, it's just so reminiscent in my mind about what happened in Munich 1972 with what happened to the Israeli athletes, the Jewish athletes there. God forbid, but do you think that's a real possibility, Israel sending their athletes there into Europe?
Of course it's a possibility.
Whether
it's a likelihood or not, I'm not sure, but it's certainly a possibility.
Yeah. I mean, God forbid. I remember watching the movie Munich 1972, the last one that they did. I think it was, who was it that filmed? The director was Spielberg. And how awful it was. And I remember, I wasn't born at the time, but I remember reading about it and studying it. And what they did to the Jewish athletes, unthinkable, unbelievable. And then next year was, of course, 1973, and what happened there, Yom Kippur War. I mean, it is very reminiscent. I don't know if Israel would send the athletes or not, but I would be very concerned of Jewish athletes in Europe.
Yes, so would I. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. David, what's your take on this? Olympics in July, and you got Europe literally just on fire.
Yeah. Well, I said several months back that they were going to keep this up and put pressure everywhere. So, and this won't be the first time that terrorists have used the Olympics to bring forth their claims. Black September did this at the Munich Olympics in '82, if that's my memory serves me right. So, but this is just one more step to just keep putting pressure on Israel. They want their state, and that's what a lot of this protesting is about. And they're having countries one after another that are lining up to create a Palestinian state or a two-state solution, so.
Is there going to be some kind of solution, Dave, in your eyes? Is we're looking at Biden's details of a 3-phase hostage deal to deal with the Israel-Hamas war. Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, you've got China on one side wants to get in the peace process. Xi's been in Singapore this week trying to get people together to put a stop to this war. So now Biden has to counter and comes up with his three-step plan. First, there's going to be a hostage release. Then there's going to be an agreement that will last like 6 weeks and a peace. And he's saying that Hamas is no longer capable of carrying out any sort of operation. And then from there, what will happen is then they'll I forgot. Then they go to from that to arranging for a state, and then they're going to the third part of the plan is to rebuild Gaza.
Well, it should have been rebuilding it 20 years ago, but nonetheless,
Well, I think they did, but they just destroyed it again.
And they stole the money.
Yeah. Billions of dollars 20 years ago. Billions, tens of billions.
First Fatah stole the money, then Hamas stole the money.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's so we got to rebuild Gaza. We got to rebuild Ukraine, which they're already talking about $1 trillion for that. Where's all this money going to come back? The world is awash in debt. America's awash in debt. New Zealand's struggling with debt. Australia's all the West is struggling with debt. And I mean, this is an economic war that's going to happen and have consequences too.
It's odd to me that they're trying to rebuild, the plans to rebuild in the middle of a war, which seems to be looming in Europe and all over the world, Taiwan, and they're talking about rebuilding. I don't know. Israel's got to get Hamas out of there. I don't know if Israel will agree to that. I know the hostages.
You have to pray that God kills Biden and Harris or something like this. They are the main obstacles to the destruction of Hamas.
Jacob, do you think in a side situation? I know what's happening here in America, with Trump, but a lot of it is could it be to prevent things like this from happening, that Trump gets involved in some kind of deal with and gets rid of Hamas, and they don't want him there because of that?
Well, they don't like the fact that it was Trump who engineered the Abraham Accords. No matter what you think of it, it is perceived as a political plus for Trump and his legacy. And they don't want that. They do not want that. Yes.
And Trump has been very vocal about the fact that, hey, they need to get rid of Hamas. They should have done it. They need to get rid of Hamas, stop shackling Israel's hands. And he could have had a deal already done. For whatever we may think of Trump, the fact that he's not in office, and you mentioned it earlier, gave Islam, gave Iran, gave Hamas the green light to do all of this.
Yes.
Yeah. I just want to bring up, I know we're finishing, and we've hit more than an hour already. We got to get into our questions, and we do appreciate all those who are watching, and we'll watch later. We're watching Catching Up with Jacob, and we've been going hard at what's going on in the Middle East, Israel, Europe, of course, what happened here in America with Trump and being charged with 34 counts of felonies, which we don't even know what they are. Nobody knows what they are, and nobody probably will know what they are, and some of the implications there. But I did want to mention the WHO treaty that did not pass. The WHO treaty, which was being ratified
Yes.
in May, did not pass. And Japan is the first country at the biggest protest against the WHO treaty, big one, that the world has ever seen. And a foreign minister spoke at this protest, apologizing for what the government did through the WHO and the vaccination process. And it was amazing to see this politician, this foreign minister or former minister, talking about apologizing what they did to Japan under the WHO, under the auspice of the WHO and the WWF. Jacob, we'll start with you. Your take on the WHO treaty not passing, and then Japan going to the people and saying, look, we need to apologize. Obviously, this was not the president, and this was not somebody in government at the current time, but there is some connection to politicians and former ministers who are saying we did something wrong to our people.
Okay, by the mercies of God, the WHO treaty did not pass. Just like by the mercies of God, Australia did not give diplomatic recognition to Palestine at the present time.
Right.
By the mercies of God. By the mercies of God, okay, these things happen. Okay. But that's all. I think it's just a divine hand, otherwise it would have happened. However, something has transpired that will be impossible for the world to ignore. That is, a major nation, a major economy has admitted the vaxxers were wrong. We know that they didn't work, and we know that people are now having side effects because of them, and a major government of a major economy is admitting it. What will the ramifications of this be? Will this cause people not to believe what they say in the future? And suppose there is something that's legitimate, where a vaccine could be developed that was a real vaccine, unlike the COVID vax, which was not a real vax. And people will decline to get it because you can't believe governments and politicians anymore. Well, we were lied to. As I've said, Fauci needs to die in prison. China needs to be held responsible for Wuhan. And those who lied need to be held accountable. Japan has at least admitted it. They've admitted these vaccines didn't work. We all know people who've had 2 and 3 boosters on top of the vax and still got COVID. The things don't work. They don't work. We were lied to. Secondly, we know that it was a scientific and public health issue that was managed as a political issue. That top scientific opinion, including Robert Malone and Michael Jensen, was suppressed. So bogus science could be trumpeted as fact. We were lied to. And now the truth is being exposed for what it is. How many people who were vaxxed have become sick? How many have died? How many will die? We don't know.
Right.
We do not know. What we do know is Fauci is not going to be held accountable. What we do know is Biden will not be held accountable. What we do know is the British government will not be held accountable. What we do know is China will not be held accountable. What we do know is the World Health Organization will not be held accountable. There'll be no accountability for these things. There never is. You know, same as the corrupt Wall Street bankers were not held accountable for 2008. Same as Chris Dodd and Barack Obama and Barney Frank were not held accountable for 2008. The people responsible for these disasters always get a free pass. Others die.
Terrible. Davey, in Australia, Davey, your thoughts on this? Because it's, I know Australia was very big on passing this through, and I was very surprised that they didn't.
Well, it's not over yet, and this is the thing. At the moment, we're getting a little bit of a reprieve, but then they're not giving up. In fact, we how do I say it nicely? One of our one of our overpaid employees. I guess that's probably the nicest way I can say it. We had our MP Mark Butler from South Australia over there a couple of nights ago, still negotiating, still selling the country out to this thing. He's selling us out. He basically saying, I'm going to quote him verbatim, "We are also fully committed to concluding the WHO pandemic agreement. Together, we have made considerable progress in our shared ambitions towards a set of binding international commitments for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response." He went on and on, but they're still doing deals. They're still trying to work this out. And what's going to happen now is there's going to be a lot more censorship pushback, because Tedros has come out too. He's been crying, doing his little boo-hoo act and that, but he's calling for more basically censorship on misinformation, basically blaming the anti-vaxxers and all the rest of it, and saying that, I'm paraphrasing, but because I can't remember his words exactly, but basically calling for greater pushback against the anti-vaxxers to silence us. So we're going to see more time with things like the censorship, with our e-safety commissioners and all the rest of it. But they also came up with what have they got now? They've just launched their new WHO investment case. So, which, if fully funded and implemented, they're going about it in other ways now. So it's not over yet. We got to keep. We got to keep pushing back.
Didn't they just say that that the police and the government will be the source for truth over there on the internet?
Yeah, got that woman. Well, what's her name, Davey? The police lady?
The police lady. Okay, I'll think of her name at the moment. She's from New South Wales.
She's the source of truth. Just what David was talking about.
Yeah. Again,
they told us the truth last time, so yes, this time we will be the truth.
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah. David Lister, what are your thoughts on this? On the WHO? I mean, I know it's a pause. They're probably going to re-up it again, but having Japan doing this, and maybe other countries will join that, but it seems to be a very divided world, divided countries over this.
Well, I see it like I saw the problem with over there when the churches and everybody thought they had won the question on marriage in California. They quit, but the devil never sleeps. They just keep going. They lose today, they start negotiating tomorrow. They just keep going. There's Tedros, I think that's how his name is pronounced.
Tedros,
the WHO there. He will keep going. He will talk and get agreements with people he can get with agreements to. All these people will not stop. I believe they're all demonically charged for this day, and they will keep going to get their piece of the puzzle put together, setting the table ultimately for the one that will come and put it all together. The AC.
The AC. Not AOC, but
no.
the AC. Okay.
No, she doesn't have enough up here. To do a jigsaw puzzle.
Well, maybe she's the head wound.
You imagine the police will be the source of authorized information, not the press, not the media.
Yeah. Can you imagine now with the artificial intelligence and people getting chips and Neuralink? I mean, they'll be able to, and that's the goal, isn't it? Pre-crime and trying to figure out who's dissenting against the government, who's not, and trying to figure out by algorithms who is the greater threat. And since they don't agree with the police, if the police facts or quote unquote facts, they're agreed upon facts, then you would be considered a criminal.
Yeah.
Not agreement with the facts. All right. Well,
hey, Marco, I had
go ahead.
I had a great experience here in the hotel here I'm staying at. There were 3 doctors that came over, young doctors just starting their life. They're in New York. They're going to be working at that big community hospital and everything. And we got on the subject of COVID and everything. And I started asking them, what did they, they really didn't know anything about it. They towed the line that they were told. And I said, I asked them, why did doctors not stand up for the right to overrule what politicians and technicians at Google and that? Why didn't you guys fight for the information and fight for scientific facts instead of just being quiet? And they just they themselves went quiet. And he says, well, then I said, they had stuff like ivermectin, and you guys, and he says, well, it doesn't affect them. And I said, yeah, but you have a right to try law, but the AMA and all you guys just went quiet. And I said, you guys need to start standing up, because I don't think a person from the government or the person from Twitter or a technician in the back has to be able to silence doctors. You guys, if you don't stand up for doing your job with the patients, more people will die. And so, they all went pretty quiet. So,
Very, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, I don't think they have answers. I think if they're thinking about it, they wouldn't have an answer, because it was really irrational. All that was done was irrational. Jacob,
I said, somebody got between you and your patient, and doctors did nothing about it.
Oh, very good. All right. Well, we'll reach the end of our catching up, and we are on every platform that we mentioned earlier, but we're going to be going to backstage for some questions. So if you have questions for Jacob, please send them through Rumble. It's on Rumble. Send them through there, and we'll be able to answer those questions. I did have one final thought, Jacob. With all this stuff going on and Christians seeing this, what are Christians to do? I mean, it seems like everywhere we go through, there is an aspect of we're blocked, we're not heard, and Christians can become very isolated from each other and from other things as fear grips many people. What is your recommendation, encouragement for Christians to do?
Preach the gospel the time we have left, and use these events as a way to engage people evangelistically. Look at the way the world's going. Look at biblical prophecy. My second is get our own doctrine right and our own lives right morally. My third is what I've always say now after every broadcast, after every webcast. Mar Anatah, Maranatha, come quickly, Lord Jesus. We need to hasten his coming, as it says in Peter. We need to hasten the return of the Lord. That's what we need to do. Ultimately, he will be the only one who stops it. And stop it, he will.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Jacob. And thank you all those who are watching. We'll go to backstage, get some answers to your questions. And their questions are coming in right now. So we'll see you on backstage. We won't be on YouTube, and we won't be on Facebook. Go to the other ones, Rumble, Memorial TV, memorialtv.org, specifically those. But if you want to ask questions, go to Rumble, and the other ones will still be on, like Vimeo and Telegram, and we'll be on those. So we'll see you guys in just a few minutes.